Cool. Okay. So welcome everybody to this month's meetup. This month is Security Month, which is going to be absolutely awesome. Before I start though, I do want to just mention that we are recording this. So please don't say anything if you didn't want it to be on the recording. Cool. So I'll start with slide one, obviously. So first off, I mean, who are we? Okay, well, we've got these lovely looking people here. Personally, I think top left is the best looking, but my personal opinion. So we've got myself, James, Mark, and our newest member, Martha. Any questions about any tech or anything, we're all over social media. And here are the social media platforms that we are on. We have a website and also a Discord chat. Don't worry, I don't expect you to remember that. Just go to the website and the link at the top. Big thanks to our sponsors, or sponsor, sorry, Scott Logic. Without those, we wouldn't really be here. Usually we kind of have free pizza and beer for everybody, but obviously #COVID. And yeah, okay, before I kind of jump into speakers then, if you do want to get in touch, obviously there's the social media things, and we do, if you want to speak at any tech or you know somebody who might want to speak at any tech, please do get in touch. Equally, if you have any feedback for the speakers this evening, that would be awesome, or even feedback for any tech, please do get in touch. I'm sure the speakers will say their social media handles when we get on to them. And I think that's it, to be honest, for now. So without further ado, Faye, you're up first. She'll be speaking about her best practices and the tips for the AWS Security Specialty Certification. So I'll hand the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen now. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. Oh, I'm sorry, beg your pardon. Go back to the beginning. Oh, sharing on Zoom. So hello everyone, I'm really happy to be here with you this evening. My name is Faye Ellis and I'm a technical instructor at ACloudGuru. And we teach loads of different courses, not just AWS. We've got courses covering GCP, Azure, and loads of DevOps content now as well. And I've been working with the company about 2 years, and I work on 3 different courses, all AWS focused. So I work on the SysOps Administrator, the Developer Associate, and the Security Specialty as well. And it's the Security Specialty that I'm going to talk to you about this evening. And I'm going to be going through my tips and best practices for passing the Security Specialty exam the very first time. So in terms of the way things are going to run, we're going to start off with the benefits of certification. We're going to move on to talk a little bit about the Security Specialty exam guide. I'm going to share with you the free and freely available AWS resources to help you prepare for this exam. I'm going to go through 3 sample questions, and we're going to go through the questions and answers together, and you'll get a chance to try and answer them as well. And finally, I'm going to share my best general study tips, which apply whether you are preparing for an AWS exam or any other kind of certification exam in IT. So before we get started, we're going to be launching a poll, and Chris is going to take care of the poll for me. So Chris, if you'd like to do the honors. I'd just like to understand where you're all at in your own certification journey. So do you already hold a certification, or are you currently studying for something, or are you just thinking about it? Okay, I think we're probably ready to end that. Thanks everyone for answering that. I can see we've got quite a wide variety. Lots of you already own a certification, a few people currently studying, and some people currently thinking about it as well. Right, if I could just get rid of this little poll thing off my... Could we end poll 1, Chris, and then it might go away from my screen?
I already have, I thought.
Don't know why it's still sitting in the middle of my...
Yeah, it says poll closed. There we go. And then if I click stop sharing.
Can we... have we done share results?
Yeah, that was up before.
It's still on my screen. Oh my God. It's still on my screen, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try and go through the slides anyway.
We might just have to drag it to the side.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't even see a cursor at the moment. It's not even showing me a cursor. No, I can't even move any of it. I'll carry on anyway. And
if you click polling at the bottom, then it should continue that. So you click polling at the bottom, and then you can click the X in the little window, and that should get rid of it. Yeah.
There we are. If I just do that, that will be better. And if I move this away as well, that will be better for me. Okay. Sorted. Okay, so why get certified in the first place? Well, I'm sure you all know that cloud computing is in really high demand at the moment, and there is a massive skills gap worldwide. So within the UK, US, and Europe as well. And getting certified, it doesn't matter where you start. You know, if you start with a solution architect or even CCP or the fundamental kind of beginner certifications, just having that certification proves that you're the go-to expert within your company. And quite a few times I've used the fact that I've been studying for a certification or I've been doing something in my own time to get myself on the best projects. And I remember, you know, the very first cloud project I did was because I went up to the project manager and I said, do you know what, I've been playing with Lambda at the weekend. I understand how VPCs work. And I've heard that you're doing a project involving AWS and you're going to be working with some serverless technologies and you're going to be using VPCs and EC2 instances as well. Can I be part of that project? And nobody ever says no. And I've done it 3 or 4 times throughout my career. And just having that, ability to demonstrate that you've got some skills in that area, even if you're just preparing for the certification, you know, it just shows that you're somebody who's interested and somebody who's learning about technology, and it will get you a foot in the door in some of the best projects. And finally, I take a look at the cloud engineering salaries this week. And according to Reed, I mean, it's quite a wide range depending on which industry you're working in. Certainly, working in the finance industry, you can definitely get close to 100K as a cloud engineer. And being certified is only going to help you with that. So let's drill down into this exam itself. And the exam is actually divided into 5 different domains. And the domains are weighted according to the number of questions you're going to see in the exam. So for domain 1, which is all about incident response, that represents 12% of the questions that you're going to see in the exam. Then we've got domain 2, which is logging and monitoring, and that represents 20%. You've got domain 3, which is infrastructure security, and that is the largest domain in the exam, and that represents 26%. You've then got identity and access management, and if you've already studied for the Solution Architect Associate or any of the AWS Associate level certifications, you'll know all about identity access management, and that's 20%. And then finally, you've got data protection, and that focuses mainly on encryption, and that is 22% of the exam. So let's take a look at each of these domains in a little bit more detail. So starting off with domain 1, incident response. So this is all about detection and recovery of security incidents in your AWS account. And there's 2 common incidents that you'll need to understand, and you'll need to understand the kind of the correct response to an incident like this. So the first one is a compromised EC2 instance. So what do you do if your EC2 instance gets compromised? Well, of course, the first thing you're going to want to do is isolate the instance from the network. So you could go in and change the security group to prevent that instance accessing other networks within your account, or prevent it reaching out to the internet and stop it from reaching a command and control server. Alternatively, you could change the routing tables so it can't reach an internet gateway, or you could even shut it down, or you could even terminate it. So it all depends really on the scenario. You know, if that instance is doing loads of damage in your account, maybe you just want to terminate it immediately or shut it down immediately. Now, the other common incident you'll need to know about is exposed access keys. So this is all about your programmatic access key and secret access key. And you might think, you know, how are my access keys going to get exposed? Well, it's more common than you might realize. And actually, last year I had a student contacting me, and what he'd done is he'd accidentally embedded, well, he'd not done, he'd on purpose, he'd embedded his access key and secret access key in his code, which is, of course, a real no-no if you're a developer. But then the mistake that he'd made is he then uploaded that code into GitHub. And unfortunately, there are malicious people out there who are running bots, and they are scanning GitHub for people who have accidentally done this and exposed their access keys and secret access keys. So it only needs to be up there for a few seconds and somebody's going to find it. And unfortunately for him, that's exactly what happened. And they started spinning up EC2 instances in as many different regions as they could, and they were running Bitcoin mining applications. So anyway, he contacted me. Why did he contact me? I don't know why I was the first person, but he contacted me, and he actually contacted me on LinkedIn. So he was really lucky that I was looking at LinkedIn at the time, and I told him what to do. So the first thing you need to do is, of course, you need to disable those access keys. So you disable the access key and secret access key. If you can, delete them. I mean, you might worry about doing that and breaking applications, but you might make the decision that actually I'm just going to delete these keys and I want to be safe immediately. And then you'll need to check your AWS account and see what's been done. You know, has somebody created a backdoor? Have they created a load of EC2 instances and other AWS resources that you're going to end up paying for? And you can look through the CloudTrail logs and see if you can find out what they've been doing. And then finally, once you've immediately, the first thing to do is, of course, disable those keys or delete them, and then when you think you've done everything, just call AWS and they will confirm that your account is secure again. So that's what he did, and he checked with AWS and they went through everything with him, and he secured his account, and he unfortunately ended up with an $80 bill, which it's not that big, but it's big if you don't have $80. So, and it's an expensive mistake for him to make on his own personal account. So hopefully he's never going to make that mistake again, and hopefully none of you will either. So in terms of the different AWS services, you're going to need to learn really well for this domain. It's things like AWS config. So AWS config is all about configuration management, and you can use it to determine configuration drift in your AWS resources, and it actually audits the configuration. So it will notify you of any changes within your account. There's also CloudTrail, which of course provides you with an audit trail of user activity, so you can see what people have been doing in your AWS account. You've got CloudWatch, which you can check for unusual metrics like high CPU activity, that kind of thing. Any unexpected activity that there doesn't seem to be a reason for, CloudWatch can alert you to that. We've also got GuardDuty, which helps with threat detection. So it's a managed threat detection service. For example, if you've got an EC2 instance attempting to contact a known malicious network or a command and control server, then that's something that GuardDuty can pick up. And we've also got Lambda, and Lambda can be used to automate some of this incident response. And it's actually a really common pattern that they come back to time and again in the security specialty exam. So you can use Lambda to update security groups, isolate a compromised instance in response to an attack, or even terminate or shut down an EC2 instance as well. So moving on to some key resources that you can use while you're preparing for the exam. And of course, getting hands-on practice is paramount. But in addition to that, there's also some free to access key resources which you can use when you're getting ready for the exam. And the first one is white papers. And white papers, they include loads of information about best practices and lots of architecture patterns and suggested ways to make your Amazon resource and your Amazon account as secure as possible. So there's one called Incident Response. And if you head to aws.amazon.com/white papers, you'll find all of the white papers in there, and you can just search for the relevant ones. And you can even search based on just the security topic. But if you don't like reading white papers, and I know some people don't, a lot of people don't, and some of these are like 100 pages long, right? So if you don't like reading white papers, then 9 times out of 10, there's an equivalent reInvent video that you can watch. And if you're like me, you like to be as efficient as possible. And I always listen to these videos at double speed, or at least on 1.5 speed. And I listen to it when I'm cooking, or maybe I'm getting ready or driving or something like that. I just have these going on in the background and try to just absorb as much as possible. So the reInvent videos, there's really as much information in them as there is in the white papers, and it's just in a different format if you don't mind listening to videos. And then the third thing that is going to help you is the FAQs. And the FAQs are great because they're in kind of a Q&A sort of a format. It's not long sentences and paragraphs, and you can find out like the most important information about these AWS services. So the ones I would read are config, CloudTrail, CloudWatch, Guard Duty, and Lambda. And you'll find all of the FAQs under aws.amazon.com/FAQs. So moving on to domain 2. And this is all about logging and monitoring. And it's testing your ability to design and troubleshoot a logging and monitoring strategy for your AWS account. And the main services that you'll need to know really well are things like CloudWatch and CloudTrail. You'll also need to know Athena. And if you haven't heard about Athena, it's actually a really cool service which allows you to run standard SQL queries on files stored in S3. So what's that got to do with logging and monitoring? Well, from a security perspective, this is going to be really useful for searching your log files, because you've got CloudTrail logs stored in S3, and Athena is often used to search CloudTrail logs. For example, you can search for activities by a specific user or service, and you can find them really easily if you are a whiz at running a standard SQL queries. That's a bit of a tongue twister for me. We've also got config, which is really important for monitoring your configuration and alerting you to configuration drift, and Amazon Inspector. Now, if you haven't heard of Inspector, it's all about security assessments. So it will run a security audit or a security assessment on your AWS account and identify common vulnerabilities and exposures and deviations from security best practice. So on to the key resources that are going to help you prepare for this domain. Firstly, there's a great white paper called Logging in AWS. And there's an equivalent reInvent video called Log, Monitor, and Analyze Your IT with Amazon CloudWatch. And in terms of the FAQs, it's CloudWatch, CloudTrail, Athena, Config, and Inspector. So moving on to domain 3, infrastructure security. And this is the largest domain in the exam. So this is all about your ability to design and troubleshoot secure networks using AWS. And there's a big focus on edge security. So the security of the edge point to your Amazon resources, so your Amazon VPC. There's also a focus on host-based security and DDoS mitigation. So the kind of services that you're going to need to know really well are things like the Amazon WAF, or Web Application Firewall. And that's a service that's a managed firewall service, which is going to help protect you against common attacks like SQL injection and cross-site scripting. In terms of DDoS protection, there's Amazon Shield, which is a managed DDoS protection service. And then in terms of actually absorbing a DDoS attack when it happens and protecting your service and making sure your application doesn't get taken out of service due to a DDoS attack, you've got technologies like CloudFront, Route 53, Elastic Load Balancer, and EC2 auto scaling as well. And those are all services which are going to help you to absorb an attack if it comes your way and prevent that DDoS attack from succeeding in taking your application offline. And then you've got the basic kind of traditional infrastructure security tools. So things like setting up a VPC correctly, using network access control lists, using security groups as well. And there's also this other service called Artifact that I wanted to highlight. And this isn't really a tool which is going to give you protection for your infrastructure security, but what it is a central resource where you can download compliance documentation for the AWS services that you're using. So say, for example, you need to demonstrate that the AWS services that you're using are PCI DSS compliant or compliant with ISO 27001. Well, you can go to Artifact and you can download compliance documentation so that you can demonstrate to your security architect or your head of security that the services that you're recommending or the services that you're using are compliant with the relevant standards. And you can just go into Artifact and search for whichever standard you're looking for. So onto the resources that are going to help you prepare for this part of the exam. And there's loads of them. There's loads and loads of white papers. So we've got VPC connectivity options, DDoS best practices, that's a really important one. And then some general ones. We've got the AWS security best practices, the well-architected framework security pillar. And if you've already done the Solution Architect Associate, you will be familiar with that, the well-architected framework already. And there's also the overview of security processes as well. And this one and the security best practices just comes up again and again. In terms of the reInvent videos, there's one that's equivalent to almost all of these. So we've got the VPC connectivity options. That's a really good one. DDoS best practices, advanced security, and well architected as well. And then in terms of the FAQs that you need to look at, it's the Web Application Firewall, Amazon Shield, CloudFront, Route 53, VPC, Elastic Load Balancer, EC2 auto scaling, Lambda, Direct Connect, Artifact, and I've also included Macie. And if you haven't used Macie before, it's actually really cool and it's really fun to play around with. And what it does is it monitors your S3 files in your S3 buckets for files that contain personally identifiable information. It's also known as PII, or when I was working at Visa, we used to call it PI, and nobody knew what we were talking about outside of Visa. But anyway, it's personally identifiable information. So basically any information that could be used for identity fraud. So think credit card numbers, driving license numbers, phone numbers, addresses, that kind of thing. And if you've got that kind of information stored in any files in S3, then Macie will be able to find it for you and it will alert you so that you can make sure that that data is protected. So Once you find out that you've got that kind of data sitting in your S3 bucket, you can then make sure that you protect it using bucket policies, identity access management policies, bucket access control lists, and you can also make sure it's encrypted as well. So moving on to domain 4, identity and access management. And if you've been working with AWS for a while, you should probably already know a lot about identity access management. So this is all about your ability to design and troubleshoot an authentication and authorization strategy for your AWS account. And, And the kind of services that you'll need to be familiar with are things like identity access management policies, and you'll actually need to know IAM policies inside out because you'll need to troubleshoot and comprehend them and work out if something is wrong in the policy as well. You'll also need to know CloudTrail and multi-factor authentication as well, and Active Directory Federation, and that can come up in the exam now and again as well. Now, in terms of the resources that are going to help you, we've seen these two white papers before, Overview of Security Processes and Security Best Practices. They both have really good sections on identity and access management. There's also two great reInvent videos, IAM Policy Master and the ID Federation for AWS. And I think this is a really good one because they actually do a demo showing you how to do identity federation with Active Directory. And sometimes we just don't get the chance to have practical experience setting up some of this. I mean, I've never actually done it myself because I don't have an Active Directory domain to play around with. But they show you exactly how to do it. And for the exam, you just need to know the high-level steps. You don't need to know all the ins and outs of it. And you definitely don't need to be an Active Directory administrator. And then in terms of the FAQs, it's things like identity access management, Cognito, which is all about web identity federation, so federating with web identity providers like maybe Google or Amazon.com or Facebook. Also, CloudTrail comes up again, and AWS organizations for organizing all of your AWS accounts. So on to domain 5, and this is the final domain, and it's all about data protection. And it's got a really heavy focus on KMS, or Key Management Service. So that's the encryption key managed service that AWS provides. So this one is all about designing and troubleshooting an encryption strategy for your AWS account. You will need to understand encryption at rest and encryption in transit as well. And basically, you will need to know everything about KMS. And the best way to do that is to get as much practical experience playing around with it as possible. Now, in terms of the resources that are going to help you, there are two great white papers, KMS Best Practices and Encrypting Data at Rest, and two great reInvent videos as well, and they are very much equivalent. So yeah, definitely don't read the white papers and the video and watch the video, just pick one and do the one that suits you. And in terms of the FAQs, it's definitely KMS. That is the one to study. So now I'm just going to talk you through some of my exam tips in terms of exam strategy. And what I try and do every time I walk into one of these exams is I try and have the same approach to these multiple choice questions. And there really is an art to answering these questions, especially when you get past the associate level. And I think the associate level questions can sometimes be quite straightforward. You either know it or you don't. But once we get into kind of the specialty level and the pro level, you really do need to have a strategy for answering these questions. So the first thing I try and do is establish exactly what the question's asking me. So I try to identify the key words in the question. Often there's a long-winded scenario attached to it, and I try to just sort of focus on exactly what is it really asking me. And then I go through the answers and I try and eliminate the ones that are obviously incorrect. And then once I've done that, hopefully I've only got maybe 2 or maybe 3 to choose answers to actually choose from. And then I try and work out which is the best answer from those 3, 2 or 3. So now I've got a few questions, a few sample questions that we're going to go through together. And Chris is going to run another poll for us, for a poll for each of these questions, and we'll go through the question first, and then I'll show you the answers, and then you'll be able to select your own best answer, and we'll see how we all do. So here is my question 1. Your application is running in AWS and needs to access historical data located in a proprietary time series database, which is located in your data center. This information is highly confidential, and the application frequently crashes because the network is unreliable. So how should you design the network connectivity for this application? Well, first of all, with this question, I would want to identify the keywords. So for me, the keywords are that you've got this data in a database which is located in your own data center, so it's outside of AWS. The information is highly confidential. So that says to me, we should probably be encrypting it from prying eyes. We don't want it going around in clear text. And the application is frequently crashing because our network is unreliable. So let's take a look at our answers. So answer A, use a VPC endpoint so that the data never leaves Amazon's network. Answer B, access the data using a secure port on the time series database so that the data is encrypted in transit. Answer C, use a VPN between your VPC and the data center over a direct connect connection. Answer D, use a VPN between your VPC and the data center and access the database using a secure port. And answer E, configure a direct connect connection between the VPC and your data center. So Chris, could we launch the poll and then everybody can select the answer that is their favorite answer?
Can't just see there's lots of people changing their mind.
Really? It's a tough one. It's a tough question. Okay, shall we end the poll? Okay, looks okay. I mean, we've got a few different answers. Okay, let's go through the answers then. Oh, sorry, didn't want to give it away. Trigger happy. Okay, so answer A, use a VPC endpoint so that the data never leaves Amazon's network. Well, first of all, this isn't going to work because the data is not in Amazon's network, remember? It's sitting in our proprietary time series database, and it's sitting in our own data center. So this would work if you've got the data in an Amazon database, but it's our own database. So for that reason, that's going to be a no. It's not even possible. Answer B, access the data using a secure port on the time series database so that the data is encrypted in transit. Well, that sounds pretty reasonable. We're encrypting the data. However, it doesn't take care of our network problem. If we've got an application that's going to be crashing frequently because our network is inconsistent and unreliable, then this isn't really going to fix the problem. It's only fixing one of our problems. So I would say for that reason, that one is a no. Answer C, use a VPN between your VPC and the data center over a direct connect connection. Well, I quite like this answer because we've got a VPN, so we've got a secure encrypted tunnel between our VPC and the data center, and we're running that VPN over a direct connect connection. So that means we've got our direct connect connection between our data center and AWS, and we've got a reliable, consistent network. So I'm going to say that sounds like a pretty good answer. So I'm not going to give it a cross. I'll just give it a question mark, and then we'll see what the other answers hold in store for us. So answer D, use a VPN between your VPC and the data center, and then access the database using a secure port. Well, this one, it seems a bit belt and braces for encryption because we're using a VPN. We've got an encrypted tunnel between our VPC and the data center, and then we're using a secure port on the database, which implies that we're encrypting our connectivity between our database and our VPC. So it seems like we're encrypting twice, and we're not dealing with this network problem. So our application is still going to fail and crash if we get that network inconsistency. So I'm going to say that one is a no as well. And then answer E, configure a direct connect connection between the VPC and your data center. Well, that's dealing with a network problem, but it's not going to secure our data. It's not going to give us encryption of data, encryption in transit for our data, for our highly confidential data. So I would say for that reason, that is not my favorite answer either. And therefore, answer C, that is my best answer. So let's move on to question 2, and well done to all of those of you who got answer C right. I think a few of you got it right. So let's move on to question 2. And this one's all about KMS, and you really need to know KMS well for the exam because you're going to see some really horrible questions on there, and either you know it or you don't. So question 2, you are using a customer master key with imported key material. The key has been in use for 1 year already, and your company policy states that keys must be rotated on an annual basis. So what should you do? Well, let's identify the keywords in this question. So firstly, we're using imported key material. We're not using key material that was generated within KMS itself. And we need to rotate on an annual basis. So let's take a look at the options. So answer A, generate new key material and import this into the CMK. Answer B, create a new CMK and import new key material into the new CMK. Answer C, configure automatic key rotation with a 1-year rotation schedule. And answer D, create a new CMK, import the new key material into the new CMK, and then delete the old key. So those are our 4 answers. And if you could select your favorite answer, the one you think is most likely. And this is a really difficult question. Okay, I think that we've got all the votes we're going to get. Well done, everybody. Thank you. Somebody got it right. Okay, so let's go through the answers together. Answer A, generate new key material and import this into the CMK. Well, unfortunately, if we do this, we are going to break that CMK and we will not be able to use that CMK to decrypt anything that we encrypted over the past year because we've put new key material into it and we're just not going to be able to use it to decrypt those files. So for that reason, I'm going to say that one is a no. Answer B, create a new CMK and import new key material into the new CMK. So we're creating a brand new CMK, and then everything that we decide to encrypt from now on, we can use this new CMK. Well, I actually really like this answer because we're not damaging the existing CMK. We're not touching it at all. We can still use that CMK if we want to decrypt files that we encrypted last month. And if we want to, we can use the re-encrypt. There's a re-encrypt command, which we can use to re-encrypt all of those files if we wanted to re-encrypt them using the new CMK. So we've got a few little options with this answer. So for that reason, I think that's a pretty good answer. So I'm going to give it a question mark and see what else we've got. So moving on to answer C, configure automatic key rotation with a 1-year rotation schedule. Well, this answer sounds pretty good. And a lot of the time, AWS services do things automatically for us. They've got a lot of enterprise features. However, the problem with this answer is that we're working with imported key material. So we created the key material outside of KMS, and then we imported it in. So how is AWS going to automatically rotate that material? It can only run an automatic key rotation with key material that was created within KMS. So for that reason, this one's going to be wrong. And it's such a shame because I think this answer always confuses lots of people because KMS does offer automatic key rotation, but only for its own key material. So that one is a no. And then answer D, create a new CMK, import the new key material into the new CMK, and then delete the old key. Well, this sounds like a very thorough answer. And I like the first bit. I just don't like the end bit. I don't like this idea of deleting the old key. And you have to be really careful when you go in and delete keys because anything that you encrypted using that key, you're not going to be able to get it back again. So I would be really wary if you see any answers in the exam involving deleting a key. And yeah, I would never pick that answer. So for that reason, I think that one is a no. And answer B is the correct answer. And one person got it right. So whoever you are, well done. You know your KMS. So congratulations. Literally no one has ever got that answer right. And I've been doing this presentation for probably about 18 months. I've done it many times and no one's ever got it right. So you're the first person. Well done. So moving on to question 3, and this is my final question. Actually, this is a really easy question because if you were paying attention earlier, then you'll know the answer. So you're working for an online retailer and your applications store a lot of data in S3. Your head of security has asked you to prepare a report, including a list of all S3 buckets, which include files containing PII or personally identifiable information. So how are you going to approach this? Well, let's identify the keywords. Firstly, we're storing a lot of data in S3, and your head of security wants the report with all the files containing personally identifiable information. So things like driving license numbers, credit card numbers, and all of that kind of thing. So let's take a look at the answers. Answer A, create a Lambda function, which calls Amazon Comprehend to perform natural language processing on each file and identify the files containing PII. Answer B, use Amazon Inspector to identify the files containing PII. Answer C, use Athena to query the data in your S3 buckets and identify any files containing PII. And answer D, use Macy to identify files containing PII in your S3 buckets. So hopefully you have identified your favorite answer. Okay, I think we're good to go. Well done. Most of you got it right. Fantastic. Okay, let me just come out of here. Go back into it. Okay, let's quickly go through why all of the other answers were incorrect. So answer A, create a Lambda function to call Amazon comprehend. Well, straight away, that's not going to work because comprehend it's a machine learning service, and it teaches you, it uses sentiment analysis. So it uses sentiment analysis to perform, to check things like, for example, you could use it to do sentiment analysis on a Twitter feed and that kind of thing, and work out, are people going to vote one way or vote another way based on what people have been tweeting. So it's great for sentiment analysis, but it's not going to identify files containing personally identifiable information. It's not for that at all. So for that reason, that one is a no. Answer B, use Amazon Inspector, and straight away, Amazon Inspector, it's not for that. And it's all about security assessments and identifying common vulnerabilities and exposures, deviations from security best practice, but it's not going to search through your S3 buckets and find driving license numbers. So I would say that one is a no. And this is definitely the kind of question you're going to see on the exam where they pit different services together, and you just need to know exactly what these services do. So answer C, using Athena to query the data in your S3 buckets. Well, if you remember, Athena is all about allowing you to run standard SQL queries. And if you were really a whiz with SQL, you might be able to draw out some of these files. You might be able to identify some of the files, but I wouldn't think that this is going to be a reliable way, and it's not a fast way. And I just would not trust this as an approach to finding all of that data. So I'm going to say that one is a no. And lastly, use Macy. Well, lots of you were listening, lots of you were paying attention, and you got it right. So excuse me, use Macy. That's exactly what Macy is for, and it's really fun to play around with. So I would urge you to definitely have a little play around with Macy and see how easy it is to find this data in your S3 buckets. So that is the end of my questions. Thanks very much, everyone, for participating. And now I've just got a few more slides to go through my general study tips. And these study tips just apply to pretty much anything that you're studying in terms of IT and certification exams. So firstly, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about mind maps. And mind maps are a really good way to structure and organize information when you're trying to take notes and remember things. And I've been using mind maps for many years. And a few years ago, I discovered this brilliant book by Tony Buzan, the inventor of mind maps, and it's called Buzan's Study Skills. You can get it on Amazon. I think I've had about 3 or 4 different copies after lending them to people and never getting them back. And it's such a good book, and it's got just loads of very cool memory techniques. It teaches you speed reading, which is wonderful for reading white papers. And of course, it teaches you the theory behind mind maps. It's also got a study about an effective review and recall strategy, and they actually studied how much information you retain when you're trying to study something new, and I will show you the results of that study as well. And finally, testing yourself is one of the best ways to implement a kind of a review and recall strategy. So you're testing your brain to recall all of this knowledge that you're trying to get it to remember for you. So I'm going to show you a mind map, and this is one of my own mind maps. And apologies, I've been an engineer for 20 years and I have 0 artistic capability. However, if you are more artistic than me and you think visually and you think in terms of pictures and diagrams, then this is going to really appeal to you, or the activity, not necessarily this example. So the idea behind a mind map is that you begin with one central idea. So this one is about Lambda, and it's based on one of Ryan's original lectures when I was first learning about Lambda. So you begin with that one central idea or topic, and then you branch off from that into subtopics, and then you group the information together in a way that makes sense to you. So I've got a topic around what is serverless and what are the benefits of serverless. Another branch about event-driven sources and what are the most common triggers for Lambda. Then I've got another one about what sort of languages I can write my Lambda functions in, so Python, Ruby, Node, etc. I've got a little bit about security and permissions and how we set up permissions for Lambda, and also a little bit about troubleshooting as well. And the idea is that you add little pictures and diagrams where possible, you add colors, and you only write one word on each line. You don't start writing out long sentences and paragraphs. You just use keywords that are going to spark an idea in your mind, because it's just too inefficient if we start writing out sentences, because you're going to have to read back this stuff again, right? You don't want to read long sentences. And the great thing about mind maps is that it's really easy to find the information that you're looking for. So if you go back and review your notes and say I kept on forgetting about the permissions for Lambda, I can go straight to that section and I don't have to read through reams and reams of notes to try and find, oh, where did I write that down? It's exactly there, and I can just look at it and read the bit that I need. And yeah, so it's a really good way of recording your notes and going back and reviewing your notes as well. And if you've never written a mind map before, I would urge you to either take a look at that amazing book by Tony Buzan, who has sadly, he passed away last year. But there's many books by him and by his team. And there's also loads of YouTube videos, very short videos that will teach you how to write a mind map. And I would urge you to give it a go and see how it transforms your note-taking experience. The other thing I wanted to show you, oh, I've spelt that wrong, sorry, the most effective review strategy. This is supposed to be the most effective review strategy. So this graph, it shows you how quickly we can forget after we've learned something. And if you take a look at the black section of this graph, it shows that the amount of knowledge retained just after you've learned something is close to around 85%, right at the beginning. But then over time, the amount of knowledge that you actually retain and that sticks in your brain really quickly falls away if we don't have an effective review strategy. So if you look at that black section, after 24 hours, most of us have only remembered about 25% of what we learned. So to me, that paints a pretty depressing picture, and there must be something that we can do about it. Well, what they discovered is that by having an effective review strategy and reviewing at set time periods, you can actually retain close to 100% of the material. So what they recommended was reviewing what you've learned on a regular basis. So after 10 minutes, then after 24 hours, then 1 week later, 1 month later, and then 3 months, 6 months, and on and on. And when we talk about reviewing the material, this could be a number of different things. So it could be reviewing your mind maps. It could be going back and redoing practical exercises to make sure that you really understand how everything hangs together. It could also be doing sample questions and using exam simulators, because testing yourself forces your brain to review that material without it having it sitting in front of you in note form. So it's a much more active way to review what you're trying to learn. And one of my favorite things to try and do is to challenge myself to try and explain a concept or a topic to somebody else. And it doesn't even need to be somebody who is that conversant with IT. Just challenging yourself to go through the motions of explaining a topic will show you where are your weak areas, and it will also reinforce what you already know. So finally, my challenge to you is to set yourself a goal and say to yourself, by this time next month, I will be certified. Announce it to the world and tell your friends and family. book the exam, and get cracking. So good luck, everybody. Thank you very much to Chris, Mark, Martha, and James. It's been really fun hanging out with you guys, and I've really enjoyed this. And thank you so much to everybody for your active participation in answering all my questions. And I hope that was helpful. I'm going to stick around and listen to Jim's talk, of course. And I think we've got a few minutes for questions. But if you think of a question after today, of course, you can contact me on Twitter. You can contact me on LinkedIn. And on Twitter, I'm normally tweeting about certification, how to prepare for various exams, and interesting stuff I find about AWS, and occasionally dog photos. So feel free to follow me on Twitter if that's your jam. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks for that, Faye. Brilliant, great talk. If you want to ask Faye a question, then feel free to stick something in the chat. I'll also let you unmute yourself if you just want to chime in and ask. I mean, there's only 30 odd people on the call, so feel free to butt in and ask, unmute yourself if you want. There was one question as well going through from Chris. I think Phil suggested following Dan Pochia. I can't remember how to pronounce his surname. But the question was, Faye, with tech evolving all the time, it often becomes out of date very quickly. Do you have any tips for staying up to date once you have your certification?
Wow, that's a really good question. At ACloudGuru, we actually have a weekly news show. It's called AWS This Week. And it's presented by myself and a couple of our other instructors. What we do every week is we go through all of the announcements for AWS, and we pick our top, our favorite ones, the ones that we think is going to impact most people. And it's usually, a handful of things, maybe 5 or 6 things. And we just give you a rundown, and it's kind of a 4-minute show. It goes out on YouTube. And yeah, you can easily find ACloudGuru on YouTube. And if you subscribe and hit the bell, then they will send you a message every time we release a new version of AWS This Week. And that's how I stay up to date. I mean, I'm researching for that show, and I'm also listening to it when the other instructors are doing it. And we also have a similar show for Google and Azure as well. And I think we've got one for Kubernetes, we've got one for Linux. So, whatever you're interested in, we are out there finding out the latest announcements for you and sharing them. There's also some great blogs as well for AWS. There's Jeff Barr's blog, and he writes lots of different big blog posts around all the latest announcements as well. So I would say that's a really good one to follow as well.
Cool. Angela was asking, does AWS offer free access to Quick Labs for practicing? Or for practice, sorry.
AWS doesn't. I don't think they do. But you do get a really good free tier with AWS when you sign up for you can just sign up for an account. You do have to give your credit card details, but you get 1 year free access to an awful lot of services. You have to be very careful though when if you're working in your own AWS account. Similar to the guy who ran up the $80 bill, it's very easy to leave things running and not realize. So if you are working in your own AWS account, playing around with things, then just make sure you delete everything. Alternatively, at ACloudGuru, if you're a member, we now have this like sandbox feature where you can spin up AWS resources, play around with it, and we pick up the bill. There's no bill for you. Of course, you're paying ACloudGuru for the privilege of that, so you are paying for it somehow, but you're not having the bother of your own AWS account, and our systems will automatically get rid of all those resources a couple of hours after you finished.
That's cool. I think something similar was somebody in our place who had a similar issue, and actually there's an open source thing knocking about. I think that enumerates the resources and tears them down after a certain period, or midnight or something like that. Thinking like run on a cron job or something. But that's cool. Has anybody got any more questions? From Alex, how would you rate the difficulty level for SCS exam compared to, for example, CDA or SAP?
Sorry, could you say those again?
Sorry, how would you rate the difficulty level for the SCS exam compared to, for example, the CDA or SAP?
Okay. Yeah, I think the specialty exams are definitely more difficult than the associate level. I think with the associate level, it's very much around, you learn something and it's testing your recall, like it's testing whether you remember a set of facts on the whole. But when you get to the specialty level and further into the pro level as well, almost every question is a scenario, and they're testing your ability to apply what you've learned and apply the best practice. So it's not necessarily so much about can you recall certain features and facts or feeds and speeds or anything like that. It's very much more about can you take those best practices and apply them in real life. So I would say for the security specialty, it's a really difficult one to, I think it's a really difficult one to prepare for. But I think if you immerse yourself in what AWS considers the best practices for AWS and for security, then you will be good to go. But it's very much not a testing of recalling of facts.
I think that's, unless anybody's else got a question, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask the question if you want. You don't have to type in the chat. We're quite a friendly bunch. We do allow people to speak. Cool. I guess I'll hand back over to Chris in a second, but I don't know if anybody wants a quick break just before Jim. Is that okay with you, Jim? A few minutes?
Yeah, that's fine.
Good stuff. So we'll have a quick, I don't know what time it's now, 36-ish, so like 22, like a 4-minute break, 5-minute break, something like that. And we'll restart at 22. Thanks for that, Faye. It was brilliant.
All right, thanks everybody.
Absolutely
I'm going to
awesome,
have a
Faye.
break and then I'm going to come back because I want to hear what Jim's got to say.
Cool.
Well, all right, we'll start again in 3 or 4 minutes. Yes. Cool. So yeah, should we kick off again then? So yeah, big thanks to Faye, and that was an awesome talk. If you have any questions or feedback for Faye, then yeah, obviously you can ping her a message or get in touch with us, and we can feed them onto Faye. Next up, we have Jim Hooker from Newcastle Building Society, and he'll be speaking about cybersecurity in the supply chain. So I'll hand it over to yourself, Jim.
Cool stuff. Right, so I'm going to kick you off screen sharing there and then see if this works. Share. Okay, so can everybody else see that?
Yep.
We can.
Okay, and can you hear me okay?
We can.
Good. Okay, so firstly, thanks to everybody at Tech Northeast for inviting me to talk to you, and thanks to Faye for that presentation. Those certifications are gold dust. Really look into it. They're worth the weight in gold. So security in the supply chain, and obviously with cybersecurity, I had to pick the most boring topic I could think of, and hopefully you'll find this so interesting and help you just think about security in the supply chain as we go forward. So firstly, just a little bit about myself. Head of security at Newcastle Building Society, and we have an interesting where we are in the supply chain's interesting because we're both a building society with standard building society stuff, accounts and branches, but we also have a tech side of the business where we're an outsourcer, so we can run banking platforms for other building societies. So we're both at the end and the middle of the supply chain. So we've got a quite good perspective of how this affects different companies in different parts of the supply chain. So why on a Thursday night am I talking to you about supply chains over Zoom? Well, there's 92% of cyber incidents occurred amongst SMEs, which build up the majority of the extended supply chain, as we'll see a little bit further on. And if you're one of your suppliers are not taking security seriously, or there are gaps in their security controls, this can undermine any technical controls that you've implemented. I imagine that I'm talking to knowing the Northeast tech scene quite well. There's quite a few small to medium-sized enterprises that have some really security savvy people in there and are doing some really good security stuff. But if your suppliers aren't taking that as seriously as you, then it all doesn't matter, because your data is leaving your business and going to somebody else's. And for those bigger businesses, if there are any control deficiencies there, this is just going to amplify those, and we'll see that a little bit as we go through the talk as well. So if I was to go up to somebody at Tech Northeast, I would typically and ask about their supply chain. This is the answer that I would typically get, is that they work for a company who have big, tier 1, tier 2 clients who supply services to this little happy guy here, and that's what they think the supply chain is typically. So if I asked to expand upon that a little bit, again talking to someone a little bit more technical, would expand that out. Now, I was debating on whether to leave the software libraries and Git dependencies in here, but these are suppliers that you are relying on. These are software libraries, and British Airways Ticketmaster fell foul of software libraries with the Mage card group attacks, leaking loads of PII all over the place. Git dependencies and who's running those Git repositories, who's maintaining them, is there any governance around those projects? Is it the latest version? Has it been forked because someone had an argument with somebody else? These are part of your supply chain, right? And then on the left-hand side, we have some more traditional suppliers. So firstly, top of the list, I'm putting Shadow IT. And this is stuff where someone with a credit card has just gone off and got some tool, and they're putting really valuable information up there, and sometimes client information, and no one knows where it is. You can have all the controls you want, but if you don't know who is actually processing your data for you, that's a problem. All sorts of stuff can happen there. But let's talk about some of the threats that exist in other suppliers as well. So outside of support, outsourced dev services is the most outsourced thing that tech companies will have. So in those companies, could somebody put some malicious code into something that you're going to supply to your client, or take information from your business through shared resources like Git repositories and things like that? Where are they based? Could they have someone just walk in the door and steal your code? That's all attack vectors for things like dev services. Third-party CMS. So your marketing department could have a website. There's nothing really to steal on there, no valuable information, but it becomes a valuable piece of information if it can be changed. Someone could stick a big image on the website, someone who's trying to attack the company and cause reputational damage. There's that too. So it could be, that's a threat right there. And comms software, so Slack, email, cloud communication providers, these companies hold most of the confidential company information you've got, all of the comms throughout the company, and of course, passing around some client data too. Whilst a lot of our companies will go to Google and Microsoft, there are a lot of smaller companies out there that are still offering these services, and they are more vulnerable to attack. And cloud compute providers, all that stuff that you just heard in the last presentation, put in this here. If you're dealing with a big certified company with ISO 27001 SOC 2 reports like Amazon, you're at less risk. But there are a lot of small cloud providers out there that don't have any of this stuff, who are operating out of small local data centers. And whilst they have their place, make sure that there's correct security controls in place. Where are they hosting it? Can someone get in and turn on the HVAC systems to destroy servers if it's got an old style water system in the ceiling? These are all things that could happen. Cyber attacks could happen to your suppliers that bring you down. So then we go a little bit further out and we say, what else do you have supply in your company? Well, property. Who looks after, where does the landlord keep the keys? Could someone steal the keys and come in and start taking information from your office? IT equipment providers, well, I'm just ordering a laptop off of a big company. Well, are those laptops being intercepted on the way? Are the seals broken? Could someone have stored malware as they come in? It's happened. And, legal services. Legal services is really interesting because typically a solicitor can do stuff on behalf of a company with the right signatures. And imagine if someone could get in and start offering, giving official documentation out on behalf of you, and you don't know what's happening because they haven't secured their email systems. That could happen, does happen. HR software. So HR software, obviously you want to protect your employees as well. There's lots of PII in there. But what if someone broke in to your HR software and managed to get the CEO's address? And obviously the CEO is working at home at the moment, so all the important notes are on the desk and on laptops and on devices there. They could just, rather than break into the nice secured office that's got locks and alarms on the doors, why don't they just try and break into the CEO's house? He's got his address there. So there's that as well. So there's a social engineering aspect to this as well for HR software. Banking's pretty obvious. You need to make sure that the banking, using any banking APIs, that they're secured and there's all the security around that. I could talk for hours about this, but luckily for you, I've kind of narrowed this whole talk down to about 20 minutes. And payroll, is an attacker going to put themselves on the payroll? Could they get some information and sell payroll information, national insurance numbers to people? There's a black market for that sort of stuff. And cleaning and maintenance staff. Who's coming into your office and clearing out the bins, which has all of the confidential information sitting in there? And those people, are they actually the cleaners? Social engineer specialists will dress up in cleaning clothes and walk around with a bucket with detergents in them to go around offices and take information. Now, this stuff happens. So this is only a small company I'm talking about. This is a small tech company, maybe 150, 200 people in it. And this is how many suppliers roughly you could see there. And then when you think about it, all of these companies here, I'm pointing at the screen, by the way, assuming you can all see where I'm pointing, but all of these companies here will also have suppliers who will have suppliers. So you could be doing, you could have lots of security controls in place that are working well. You could even, your suppliers could even have reasonable security controls, but what about their suppliers? And what about their suppliers? And you kind of get into tinfoil hat territory if you think about this too hard enough. But it kind of shows where the threat could be in any of these chains. So it won't happen to us, is what we hear. We're a company in Newcastle. We're not some big HSBC. We're not Microsoft. It won't happen to us. Well, it will. And if it has, if you don't know about it, it's probably already happened at some point and you just don't know about it yet. So I am going to talk about one of these big supply chain breaches. And I'm going to talk about a company you'll all have heard of, which is Phaseo Mechanical. Everyone's heard of Phaseo Mechanical, right? If you haven't, apparently, according to their About Us page, they are refrigeration. Phaseo is refrigeration. So they're actually a small company around 2013 that were based in Sharpsburg, Pennsylvania. They supply HVAC and refrigeration services. They have a tier 1 client. Good business is good. They're a family-owned business, and funnily, the president and the CEO, they're both called Ross Phaseo because it's a family business. But I can imagine the confusion that happens over there with things like mail and telephone calls. But in 2013, they were hit with a phishing attack over email. And that's important because the tier 1 client is certainly someone you would have heard of. It's Target, the big store in the US. They're the 8th largest retailer in the US, and they have just over 1,800 stores. Now, it's funny I'm talking about this at Black Friday weekend because this was a Black Friday attack. The attackers purposely executed this attack ready for Black Friday weekend because they knew they could steal 40 million credit card details from Target because it was going to be the biggest shopping day of the year and more people were going to be using those swipey card machines. So this happened and it was pretty big. It was 40 million PII breaches. It's disputed. There are some people that say 70 million, but let's just stick at 40 because we don't want to be too horrible to them. Of course, as well, reputational breach. I mean, you got the likes of me talking to you on a Thursday night at this, and that can't be good for them. So yeah, there's reputational issue there, and $162 million in fines. $162 million, and to put that, to visualize that, that is 474 million Cadbury Freddos at today's price. Now, actually, I gave this talk about 18 months ago, and it was 370 million. So I don't know what's happened there. So more chocolate is all I can see, but that's big fines. That's what I'm trying to get across here. So what happened? What actually happened in this breach? Now, I put a little disclaimer there. This may be full of lies because this is information that people have pieced together, reputable security researchers, and how this attack went down. So firstly, we know that there was a phishing campaign, and they one of the employees in Phaseo Mechanical opened up this malicious attachment. It got through their security controls, probably a bit of antivirus. This is 2013, by the way, so it was a little while ago, not as sophisticated controls. But they opened up an attachment, still relevant today, still the #1 attack vector. And then with that, with the payload in that attachment, they were able to establish a command and control channel. So what that means is a hacker was able to take control of a system and use that as their base inside in the network to go and do other stuff. And they would have moved laterally through the network and compromised other systems. Now, one of those systems would have been the support systems that are used to maintain the HVAC and refrigeration units in the stores, in the target stores. So they had a direct link in there. So suddenly now they're in all the stores, all the target stores. Now, the really interesting bit is now that Target have decided to put HVAC systems on the same Wi-Fi, the same wireless network as their credit card readers. No separation, just, you know, all on the same VLAN. As I referred to earlier, that's just amplifying a poor control. This whole thing, it shows it up. And another aspect in the supply chain is that the card readers had a vulnerability as people were swiping the cards in using the magnetic strips, because before, I think it was around 2016 in the US, you didn't have chip and pin. It was just magnetic stripes, which is plain text credit card numbers stored in RAM in these credit card readers. And you can see what happened there. They've managed to connect to those, take advantage of that, RAM dump all the numbers in, and suddenly 40 million credit card numbers. That's how we think it was done. It probably was. So there we go. That is a real world example. And again, as I told you, phishing is still the #1 attack vector. It's there, and it's only getting worse now. Everyone's at home and everyone's kind of a little bit off their guard because of COVID. So what did we do about it? Scared everyone to death, and now there is light at the tunnel. There is stuff we could do about this. And I tried to distill this down as much as possible, but really this is the winning formula. So firstly is education. You need to make sure that you have a solid security awareness and training program, and you need to make sure that there are real consequences. Where is that data going? We talk about the CIA of data in security, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Hello? Oh, I can hear somebody. Can everyone else hear that? Or am I hearing words?
Everyone, mute their mics, please.
Okay.
وبالمات من البست يعني كمان قال لي
this is supply chain hack. So education, that's fine. Solid education and awareness piece. Make sure that when people know, they take the CIA of data, confidentiality, integrity, and availability think about it. Where is it going? If something happens to them, what happens to each of those aspects of data? And due diligence. Actually figure if you're going to be passing your valuable data to somebody, this is your whole company, right, is at stake. Make sure you know who you're passing it to, and make sure that they have solid credentials in place, which we'll talk about on the next slide. And then monitoring, because what they may be good today, but they may not be good tomorrow, and the threat landscape is changing all the time. So make sure you're monitoring your suppliers, make sure that they're having their audits done, make sure that you're in touch with them to talk about high visibility, high criticality attacks and vulnerabilities, and they're being patched and that type of stuff. So due diligence. Now this is going to help you as you pick your suppliers. And hopefully this will help you give confidence to your clients who may be in the middle of the supply chain, that you're looking after their data. So firstly, the NCSC do have 12 supplier security principles, which I'd encourage everyone to go and have a look at. Just Google NCSC supplier security principles, and they separate it into 4 domains. It's a really good starting point to think about how data is being, what you should look for. And then we look on the left side, and you should really look in the UK. Be looking for cyber essentials. So cyber essentials is an NCSC stamp of approval to say that at a point in time you are able, your patching is up to date. You've got some access control. They do a little bit of pen testing on you. Nothing too vigorous. But it gives you some assurance that some security is happening. There's phishing attacks and things like that are reasonably protected against. You've got antivirus in place, your patching's up to date, bread and butter stuff. Cyber Essentials is self-certifying, so be aware of that. Cyber Essentials Plus means that someone comes and actually validates it. So keep that in mind. And as you move a little bit further as a company matures, they'll look into implementing an ISMS, an information security management system, and the gold standard for this is ISO 27001. So ISO 27001 on its own is not an indicator that you've got good security, but with the documentation it provides, you're able to work out how an organization applies controls to meet the risks that the business face. It means that it shows that a business is evaluating the risks and identifying those risks and properly meeting them through the ISO 27001 progress, and then monitoring them. So there is a monitoring piece in that. And that's a certification that happens every year with a surveillance audit. So they just come in and check a few of them to make sure it's still working every year. So ISO 27001, big fan. I'd really recommend it. And then as an organization matures, you can look into SOC 2 reports, which is it's a report that has five domains. They've got weird names of things. They're called areas of focus within those domains. They can only be done by the big top accounting firms. They cost lots of money, but it is a very good way to give assurance of how a business operates securely. There are 2 types. There's a SOC 2 type 1, which is a point in time assessment. And then there's a SOC 2 type 2, which is an assessment over a fixed period of times. That could be all the way through the year. They're constantly evaluating those controls. So there in a nutshell is with these things in place, it will not only help you mature your security capability, but it would also make sure that you're able to manage your supplier's security capability and provide that assurance to your clients. And as well, if there's a lot of startups in the region, this is increasingly becoming a board level and an investor level concern. With GDPR and the types of breaches that are being bounded around, we're looking at British Airways, 100 million plus fine from the ICO. These are things that investors and boards are now really worried about, because it could take the business off the face of the earth, really. So that's in a nutshell, that is security in the supply chain, and hopefully this talk has given you something to think about next time you decide to sign up for something, or you can see someone else, another team in your business signing up for something to put the data into, or you're looking at a new supplier, or any of that really. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for having me, everyone in Tech Northeast. Happy to answer any questions, and if you want to listen to some real nonsense, then my Twitter handle's there, more dog photos as well. But there we go. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks, Jim. I'm going to go to some questions. If you've got questions for Jim, then feel free to ask. I guess the thing for me is, the good thing about having a 4- and 6-year-old Jim in the house is I've got Freddos on hand, so I'm about to eat this.
Imagine 474 million of those.
I don't have anywhere half a billion downstairs. I've also that many for the kids.
Rich man, they're about 25p now.
Cool. Questions for Jim?
I've got a question. So have you ever used, I've written it down actually, because I wrote it down while you were talking. So have you ever used a fake phishing attempt to try and test your employees? Like sending, like, for example, I worked for an organization called Market. They're a bit like Bloomberg. They do market data. And what they used to do is send us fake LinkedIn requests to our company email to see if we'd click on the link and accept it. And like every sort of month, they would send us another fake phishing attempt. So we got really good at identifying them and recognizing them. Is that something that you've ever done or would consider doing?
Absolutely. It's actually a really good, so email protection. So coming from an ISO 27001 background, one of the controls in Annex A of that actually talks about email protection of email and communication systems. And as part of that ISO standard, you have, if you implement a control like reporting spam email or dealing with spam emails or a filter or something like that, you need to be able to test it. So this is a really good way to audit and make sure the control is effective, because if you use those tools and it turns out that everyone's falling for it, then you need to change the way that the risk is not being mitigated. So you need to implement something, improve that control to make it work. But yeah, there's various tools out there as well. I've actually found the best way to do it is to have someone in-house craft the emails and if you're using Slack, then use Slack templates to try and get people to hit the button to log into the Slack server and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a really valuable tool. There are tools out there, but I really think you can't be having someone craft a phishing campaign for you. Really recommend that.
On the flip side of that, Jim, we actually had an email not so long ago, it was about a month ago, Chris, I think it was, wasn't it, from our general manager, which looked like a phishing email and nobody clicked on it. And it turned out you actually had to send another email and said, no, this is a genuine thing, please respond. And it was, it looked like a phishing email, then we went, no.
Yeah.
Well, this is it. We actually, now and again, in various places where I've worked, we've sent out emails to people saying, oh, please register for your cyber security training and stuff. And I get loads of messages. Are you trying to trick me? Are you trying to, so it does get to a point in security where half the emails you send out, people think you're trying to phish them. And it can be quite frustrating.
I think, what do you say? Stuart actually posted the link to a YouTube video in the channel. I'd imagine probably don't click that right now. I don't know whether it is Stuart. Speak up, Stuart. What you up to?
Shifty character, Stuart.
There's a question from Andy saying, you talked about education, due diligence, and monitoring. Do you think these three things could have stopped the target attack? Sorry.
Oh, that's a good question. So I think the answer is yes, right? It absolutely could have. So to start off with, education and awareness is really often swept aside in terms of importance, with technical controls usually taken front and center, but it's so valuable because it helps you develop that mindset into how to identify where potential threats could be. And if people were properly educated, then they would have known that it was a bad idea to put the card readers on the same VLAN and the same wireless as the HVAC system. It potentially have stopped that person in the engineering firm opening up the phishing email. It could have better the techs on both sides that were organizing the remote support piece. It would have better made, when they were designing that solution, better design it with those things in mind. So absolutely. And obviously with and we talk about monitoring, that if people leave companies, they don't document stuff properly. When new projects happen that piggyback on other technology, you need to make sure that what's coming and what the current state is the state that you last checked it, at least. It's got to, and actually most importantly, something I didn't mention there is as part of that due diligence piece, you need to make sure that if you've set a standard for how you want your data protected, that the companies that are looking after that data for you, they're processing it, are at least meeting those standards. Because, you know, then why are you doing it? If it's you know, it's key to that. But yeah, I think there are, you know, it could have stopped, all three of those could have stopped that attack.
All right, cool. You know, massive thanks to Jim. That was awesome. Any questions or anything, then yeah, you can get in touch with him or get in touch with us and we can feed on Tim. I'll just steal the screen back.
Cool. Whilst you're doing that, actually, Scott has posted something really good in the chat there. Consider rights to audit and continuous assurance, and make sure that's in contracts. So, you know, if you need to if you want to audit your suppliers, make sure that you can, because in your contract you may not be able to. But really good, Scott, for picking that out there in the chat.
Brill. Cool. Okay. So yeah, I guess before we wrap up, I just want to reiterate. Oh no, didn't want that slide. I just want to reiterate. If you want to speak at any tech, or you know somebody who you think might want to speak at any tech, or even there's somebody that you've seen at a conference which you would like to see speak here, please do get in touch, and yeah, we can hopefully sort something out. Next month, so we're into December, so we've got our Christmas
Can't believe
special.
you did Christmas decorations in November. Like, sorry.
Hey, you know what it is? I saw Christmas stuff in Lidl, so if they can do it, we can do it. Yeah, so obviously it's our Christmas. It'll be 10th of December, and we're going to do something a little bit different. Usually, our talks are kind of centered around sort of software stuff, but this time around, we've got our hardware month. So Paul Futenby, who, as Mark mentioned, yeah, he is meant to be speaking in December. Definitely one to come along to.
It's relevant, isn't it, to the current pandemic? That's it.
It does, yeah. I don't want to give everything away, really, but
actually, I just noticed Vinny's got his hand up. Did you want to say something, Vinny?
Sorry.
Feel free to unmute yourself. You should be able to do that.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
You're really quiet.
You might have to shout.
Serious listener. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're really quiet, Vinny. You might have to shout.
Okay. All right. So I'm being the serious listener for the while, so I've been looking at the chats. That's fine. Just a question for Faye. I'm in the cloud space for quite some time, and I've been an architect over the few years. Just on the continuously evolving environment, especially in the cloud space. Faye, do you recommend focusing on one of the cloud service provider or study them all? The problem I've got is, I think it relates perfectly with the topic that you mentioned about the memory thing, the memory boost. And it's about the names and the implementation approaches of the various services on the various cloud providers, just the difference in terminology.
Yeah.
That's about it. So what do you recommend? Do you recommend focusing on AWS or Azure? Because I've transitioned across the various cloud environments. It's Cloud Interconnect, be it ExpressRoute, be it AWS Direct Connect, be it what's that? Yeah, so basically I've transitioned across the various cloud environments, and the problem is that it's about the focusing on one of the cloud providers, or just work through all of them.
I guess you're talking about breadth or depth, aren't you, Vinny? Do you actually specialize in one or do all? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, you know, I find it really difficult to really go in depth in two kind of parallel sort of technologies. And for a long time, I was specialized in Salaries because, you know, I graduated a very long time ago, and that was the first Unix that I learned. And I think of everything in terms of Salaries. You know, if I'm starting to work in Linux, I think, oh, I know how to do it in Salaries. Is it going to be the same in Red Hat? And then I have to kind of translate if it isn't. Or if I'm working in AIX, I know how to do it in Salaries. Well, how do I do it in AIX? And yeah, it's really difficult. I actually did the I actually did the Google ACE. It's Associate Certified Engineer, which is very similar to the AWS SysOps exam.
Yeah.
And what I find with, particularly with cloud providers, is they are all providing pretty much the same service. There's a few little nuances, but the worst thing and the killer thing is the terminology. They're inventing their own terminology, and it might be they call it the same thing, but it does something slightly different, or it does exactly the same thing, but they're giving it a different name. And I just really personally find it very difficult to translate from one to the other. At the moment, AWS is the front runner, and they've got the most services, and they've got the most features. They've been going for the longest amount of time, and they are by far the front runner. But you've got Azure is the second one, very, very popular. And then I think Google is still, behind in terms of popularity and take up in industry. So I would say if you're going to specialize something, personally, I would go for AWS. But however, my background is Linux and Unix. So a lot of people might say, well, if you were starting out now, maybe you'd go for Google instead, because that's very much more focused towards Linux and Unix. However, if your background is more Microsoft and you understand Microsoft technologies better than you understand sort of Linux style technologies, then Azure you're probably going to be more au fait with Azure, and all of that's going to make a lot more sense to you when you come to deal with their own, managed services that are relating to Microsoft. And having a Microsoft background will give you a head start with Azure. So I would think about your background. If you're more sort of moved towards Linux, then I would go for AWS or Google. But personally, I think AWS is more prevalent. And if you've got a background in Windows, then you will definitely have a head start on Azure type technologies. But certainly, I think for the UK market, it's mainly AWS and Azure, and some companies are even starting to use both. But I think if you're conversant in one cloud technology, you can easily translate the knowledge and the theory and everything else. You can easily translate it to something else. It's just the terminology that's going to kill you.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
exactly.
I don't know how helpful an answer that was.
Almost like someone needs to come up with a glossary, doesn't it? Like
definitely.
A cloud glossary, makes sense.
Yeah. What about Alibaba and IBM, Faye? In terms of just
that's an interesting one. I was thinking about buying some shares in Alibaba, actually.
They're doing well. I think
they're
only
doing
Americans
amazing.
trust them, I don't think at the moment, especially under Trump. But
Anyway,
sorry,
I think
Chris,
it would take a long time for UK businesses to really have faith in using Alibaba. I just think that it's too niche.
Yeah.
At the moment, maybe in 10 years' time it might be different, but personally, I would stick with AWS and Azure.
Cool. Chris,
I absolutely echo that from a security perspective.
Yeah.
Alibaba, remember?
That was me being devil's advocate. Chris, do you want to sort of do an announcement? Sorry, I did hijack that a little bit by butting in.
So I mean, basically all I was going to say is just a massive thanks to Faye and Jim for giving up their time this evening. They didn't have to, big round of applause. Awesome talks. If you do have any more questions, though, a few of us will be sticking around at the end of the call. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all in December. Thank you very much,
everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, Jim.
Thank you all. Thanks for inviting me to.
Cheers.